Three Sisters of Fate, from Greek mythology. In a shadowy corner of the ancient world, where the boundaries between mortal and divine blurred, there existed a place beyond the reach of time itself. It was here, in the twilight realm, that the three sisters of fate, known as the Moirai, held court. Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, each one played a vital role in the weaving of destiny. Together, they controlled the threads of every living being's life, from the moment of birth to the inevitable end. But their story, like so many others, begins not at the beginning, but in the middle of something far more complex and intertwined. Let us start with a thread, thin yet unbreakable, held delicately between the fingers of Clotho, the youngest of the three. She spun the thread from a golden distaff, her eyes distant, as if she were peering into the very soul of the one whose life she was beginning to weave. Beside her, Lachesis, the middle sister, measured the thread with a solemn expression, determining its length, deciding the span of the life it represented. And finally, Atropos, the eldest and most severe, stood ready with her shears, poised to cut the thread when the time was right, bringing an end to the life it represented. But perhaps this is not the best place to begin. Perhaps we should start elsewhere, at a time when the Moirai were summoned by the gods themselves to decide the fate of a mighty hero. On a night when the stars shone brighter than usual, Zeus, the king of the gods, paced the grand halls of Olympus. His thoughts were troubled, for a great war loomed on the horizon, and a hero of immense power was destined to rise, a hero whose fate was so intricately woven that even the gods could not foresee the outcome. It was in this moment of uncertainty that Zeus called upon the Moirai, the three sisters of fate, to shed light on the path that lay ahead. The Moirai arrived silently. Their presence felt more than seen, as if the very fabric of reality trembled in their wake. Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos stood before Zeus, their expressions inscrutable. "Tell me," Zeus commanded, his voice heavy with authority, "what fate awaits this hero who is destined to play such a pivotal role in the war to come?" Clotho, her fingers already busy spinning a new thread, looked up at Zeus with eyes that seemed to see through time itself. "The thread of this hero's life is strong," she said softly, her voice like the whisper of a distant breeze. "But its strength is not in its length, nor in its durability. It is in the choices made along the way." Lachesis, holding the measuring rod, added, "This hero's fate is intertwined with many others. The thread is long but not infinite. How it is measured will depend on the actions taken, the paths chosen." Atropos, her shears gleaming in the dim light, spoke last, her tone as cold and final as the cut she would one day make. "When the time comes, the thread will be severed. It matters not how great the hero, nor how noble the deeds. All must come to an end." Zeus, though mighty, could not help but feel a chill at Atropos's words. The Moirai were not to be swayed, even by the king of the gods. They served a power older and greater than any Olympian, the power of fate itself. But perhaps even this moment is not the true beginning of our story. Perhaps we should start at the very moment when the Moirai were first formed from the very fabric of the universe itself. Before time had names, before the gods had dominions, there was only chaos, a vast formless expanse where nothing and everything existed simultaneously. From chaos emerged Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky, and with them the cycle of life and death began. It was in this primordial state that the Moirai were born, not as daughters of any god, but as forces of nature, as inevitable as the dawn, and as unyielding as the night. They were the weavers of fate, the arbiters of destiny, and the guardians of life's most profound mystery, the end. Clotho, the spinner, was the force of creation, bringing life into the world with every thread she spun. Lachesis, the measurer, represented life itself, determining the course and length of each thread. And Atropos, the inevitable, was death, the final force that cut the thread when life had run its course. Together they existed beyond time, their work eternal and unchanging. Mortals prayed to them, gods feared them, but none could escape their touch. For the Moirai did not serve the gods. They served a higher order, one that governed all existence. And yet their work was not without emotion. Though they were often portrayed as cold and distant, the Moirai understood the weight of their responsibility. Clotho, as she spun her threads, often felt a pang of sorrow for the lives she began, knowing the hardships they would face. Lachesis, as she measured the threads, sometimes hesitated, feeling the weight of each choice, each decision that would shape a life. And Atropos, though her hand was steady, sometimes paused before making the final cut, feeling the gravity of what it meant to end a life. But they were bound by their duty, by the very nature of their existence. They could not interfere with the lives they wove, nor could they change the outcomes they foresaw. They were the Moirai, the three sisters of fate, and their work was to maintain the balance of the universe. So perhaps this is where our story truly begins, with the Moirai themselves, born from the chaos of creation, existing outside the bounds of time, weaving the destinies of gods and mortals alike. But even they, with all their power and wisdom, could not foresee every twist of fate. For fate, though guided by the hands of the Moirai, is also shaped by the choices of those who live it. And so, the threads they wove were not fixed. They were ever-changing, influenced by the actions of mortals and gods, by love and hate, by war and peace. In the end, the story of the Moirai is not one of endings, but of continuations, of lives beginning, living, and ending, only to begin again. It is a story of the endless cycle of existence, where each thread, each life, is but a part of a greater tapestry, woven by the hands of the three sisters of fate. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all, that fate, while powerful and inevitable, is also fragile and mutable, shaped by the choices we make and the lives we lead. In the hands of the Moirai, the threads of fate are woven, measured, and cut, but it is up to us to determine how brightly they will shine before the final snip of Atropos' shears.